Good evening, Kobe. Good evening, Matt. Ben, what are you doing here when I'm here? That's not usually happening. It must be something big. And it is, because this morning the NTT INDYCAR series dropped a major bombshell. Team Penske have faced disqualifications for violating the INDYCAR rulebook at the season opening Firestone Grand Prix on the streets of St. Pete. Now, race winner Joseph Newgarden and teammate Scott McLaughlin were both disqualified from the race for violating the push-to-pass parameters. Meanwhile, Will Power got docked 10 points. With Newgarden getting disqualified, this meant that Arrow McLaren's Pato O'Ward is now the winner of the Firestone Grand Prix at St. Pete. According to INDYCAR, Team Penske violated the following rules. Rules 14.19.15, an indicator to enable push-to-pass will be sent via the CAN communication from the timing and scoring beacon on board the car to the team data logger. This signal must be passed on to the ECU unmodified and uninterrupted during all road and street course events. Also, Rule 14.19.16, full stop, race starts and any race restarts that occur before the lap prior to the white flag or prior to the 3 minutes remaining in a timed race event will have the push-to-pass system disabled and will be enabled for a given car once that car reaches the alternate start-finish line. Now, the alternate start-finish line was located just before the final hairpin corner at St. Petersburg, but it took a while for this to come to light. In fact, it was during the morning warm-up session hours before last Sunday's Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach that INDYCAR discovered the team's possible rules violation. After an extensive review of data from St. Pete, INDYCAR learned that Team Penske manipulated the overtake system so that Newgarden, McLaughlin, and Power had the ability to use push-to-pass on starts and restarts. Now, it was determined that Newgarden and McLaughlin gained a competitive advantage on the restarts, while Power did not. All three entries were fined $25,000 and will forfeit all prize money from St. Pete. INDYCAR President Jay Fryer said the integrity of the NTT INDYCAR series is critical to everything they do. And INDYCAR will debut a new technology inspection procedure this weekend at Barber Motorsports Park to deter this violation in future. The photo taken by Joe Sabinski from Penske Entertainment. Well, Ben and Matt are here with me now as well. Ben, good to have you on the Grid Tonight show once again, not stepping in for me hosting duties, but this is a bit more serious, and we'll start with you tonight because how bad does this look for Team Penske? And are you surprised that it took INDYCAR this long to find a violation this big of the rulebook?
Well, first of all, good evening, Josh. Good evening, Matt. And thanks, as always, for the opportunity. It's always an honor to come on this show. And I certainly have some thoughts on the news that is broken this week in the INDYCAR series, not just this story here, but I was going to come on anyway tonight to talk about the ratings, and we'll get into that a little bit later. I'm not going to say this isn't a bad look for Team Penske. Of course, it absolutely is. But it is a significantly worse look for the series, in my estimation. The problem, and I think a lot of people are overlooking this, the problem is not the disqualification. If you break the rule book, you're found to be in violation of the rule book. We determined this over in NASCAR several years back when we said we're done with encumbered wins. You're getting disqualified. We're taking the win away. We're taking your finishing position away wherever you are. If you're found to be in violation of the rules to that extent that you gain a competitive advantage, you get disqualified, stripped of your result. No problem with that. It's the right decision. That's not the problem. The problem is that this race took place 45 days ago. The problem is that these violations were not discovered in a technical post-race inspection process that same night that the race took place, or at the very least, within 2 or 3 days of that race taking place, when it's fresh in everybody's mind. Imagine your Pato Award day and you're just scrolling through X/Twitter like everybody else is, like we all were this morning around 10 a.m. when we got the news that, oh, by the way, all of a sudden, you remember that race a month and a half ago? Yeah, congratulations, Pato. You actually won that. I mean, I don't know how I would feel if I was gifted a win in that scenario like that. I mean, imagine if this happened in the month of May. imagine if the Indianapolis 500 takes place and we crown a winner, we crown a new Indy 500 champion, we start sculpting their face on the Borg Warner trophy, we take all the pictures and do all the media tour and all that stuff, and we're reminiscing on this for a month and a half. And only 45 days later do we find out in the middle of July, oh, by the way, it turns out you had an illegal part, or you used this part of your car illegally and modified it in an illegal way, and you gained a competitive advantage, and we have to take away your Indy 500 victory. I mean, can you imagine the optics of that for a series that is struggling so mightily right now to find its identity and find its footing and remain just somewhat competitive with the other major forms of motorsport in this country right now? It is just absolutely ridiculous. It is utterly embarrassing that we are sitting here today talking about this 45 days after the fact when we should be talking about the disastrous ratings that we saw at Long Beach and other motorsports news taking place. But yet this is the top story. I'm not saying that it was wrong for IndyCar to come down so hard on these violations. That's not the problem. The problem is that they didn't discover these violations, or if they did, they kept completely silent about it. Jackson, our colleague, was on site at Long Beach this weekend. He told us he didn't hear any murmurs or rumors in the paddock that this was a possibility, that this was starting to brew, that IndyCar was saying, we've discovered this and we're going to look into it a little bit deeper. And if we find that they violated the rules, then this could be a possible. We didn't hear any of that. This was completely unexpected, completely out of the blue. And the fact that it is supplanted all the top storylines that we had for tonight's show, and this is what we're talking about, I think is utterly ridiculous and embarrassing for the series.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that you said there, Ben. Absolutely right. The fact that it came up in the warm-up on Sunday morning pre-race at Long Beach, maybe obviously then it was, we'll look into this. Let's get the race done and out of the way, and then we'll look into this properly during the week. But yeah, you're right. An absolute grenade being dropped 3 o'clock our time here in the UK, 10 o'clock Eastern this morning, of a race, as you said, that was 6 weeks ago that now has changed. Relief somewhat maybe for Pato O'Ward, who should have won at St. Pete a couple of years ago and had that engine gremlin that cost him the race late on to Marcus Ericsson. Now he's got one back. So a positive for Pato and McLaren there. But I think here's what I've just been thinking while we were getting into that and listening to what you were just saying. Two things. We always hear when we watch Formula One, if you get the Sky Sports commentary, you can press the red button and watch whatever onboard camera you like. Well, in IndyCar, when you press the push to pass button, there's a light comes up on the steering wheel. So has it taken them 5 or 6 weeks to look at the onboards of the restarts, of which Scott McLaughlin gained 4 positions on restarts at St. Pete? That's clear that either he was just brilliant on the restarts or he had a competitive advantage potentially, which he shouldn't have had. Why are the drivers pressing the button on these restarts knowing that they shouldn't have them? My first thought was, well, maybe Penske have managed to automate their push-to-pass system. Obviously, that's not the case. Congratulations to Will Power for not pressing his button. And also, in this amazingly massive downtime of IndyCar we've had, which did include an event, of course, which, again, back to the ratings, no one watched and no one cared about. We had 9 hours of testing. The cars were not touched. How has this taken this long? Just should have been picked up at thermal. Surely, if this was in the cars as a data point and in the telemetry, then I know there was obviously no restarts during the test, but surely there's got to be something in there which spikes an interest from some Penske engineer to go, oh, hang on a minute, we've messed up here. But we're going to talk lots of IndyCar tonight, and the series is in dire trouble. And for you to have your championship leader, probably the most popular driver, former last year's Indy 500 winner, lose the opening race this long after the opening race for a technicality, is it any wonder people aren't watching?
Yeah, absolutely as well, because it really has sort of been a very disrupted start to the season, with having the opener at St. Petersburg, then going to 4 open tests at Thermal Club before we had later on that weekend the $1 million challenge that wasn't actually $1 million. It added to about 1.7 million. That was spread about everybody because, as we mentioned on the show, not everything was lined up there with the sponsorship agreements. Then we had the open test, the 2-day open test at Indianapolis. That wasn't quite 2 days. It wasn't even quite a day because the rain came in and then they called everything off. So we only got about 2 hours. And then we had the whole of Long Beach, which I thought went really well and actually felt more of a season opener. Ashton Police says, whoa, DQ? What? Yeah, absolutely. Disqualified throughout it as well. Jono says, man, this will put McLaughlin to the very back. He had a mechanical issue at Long Beach, so a massive setback, but rules are rules as well. Indeed, they are coming into it as well. This is the latest as well that we've got coming up with the Team Penske statement. This is what they released about half an hour after the INDYCAR statement came out. This is from Tim Cindric, the president of Team Penske. Unfortunately, the push-to-pass software was not removed as it should have been following recently completed hybrid testing in the Team Penske IndyCars. This software allowed for push-to-pass to be deployed during restarts at the St. Petersburg Grand Prix race when it should not have been permitted. The number 2 car, driven by Joseph Newgarden, and the number 3 car, driven by Scott McLaughlin, both deployed push-to-pass on a restart, which violated IndyCar rules. Team Penske accepts the penalties applied by IndyCar. Who owns IndyCar? Oh yeah, Roger Penske. It's a bit weird, isn't it? It's like they've shot themselves in the foot. But looking at the implications of this disqualification of Newgarden and McLaughlin, it does shake up the championship picture. Newgarden goes from being the points leader to 11th in the standings. He's 45 points behind the new points leader, Scott Dixon. McLaughlin is now last in the points, all the way down in 29th with only 5 points. And we remember when Meyershank Racing lost its Rolex 24 at Daytona win last year. The people in the IMSA paddock and fans alike didn't respond favourably to them for a while after the incident. If it wasn't for the disqualification at Daytona, Meyershank Racing would have walked away with last year's GTP championship. Instead, Acura parted ways with the team at the end of 2023 and left MSR on the sidelines from IMSA competition this year. Now we wait to see what the response will be from the IndyCar paddock this weekend at Barber regarding the Team Penske's disqualifications. Certainly, it is weird, as Astral Police says. Wouldn't it display the time spent using push-to-pass as well? I just can't fathom how it would take so long to make this call. This is bizarre. Well, Matt, you might know this as well. I don't know, Ben, if you have the timing screens up on your data when you watch the races, but certainly from mine and Matt's point of view, we have the timing data and we have PTP, which is a push-to-pass. It starts at 200, and then we see exactly how many seconds throughout the race everybody has left. For instance, this weekend in the closing laps, we saw that the race leader had 22 seconds left, whereas P2 only had 3 seconds in the last 2 laps. So we're able to build that tension up to the viewer to say this is likely not going to happen the way you think it will. So if we could see it at home, it's a bit of a disappointment that they can't see it in IndyCar, to tie back to your point, Matt. So to round this up with a question, can Newgarden and McLaughlin dig themselves out of this hole to get back into the championship contention? And what type of response do you expect at Barber from the other IndyCar teams and the drivers about this bizarre situation?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I didn't even think about that when I made my comment about the lights on the steering wheel on the onboard cameras. Of course, you could see it on the timing screen. So again, probably should have been picked up straight away that something fishy was going on. Well, let's not forget at Barber, which is coming up this weekend. You might not know that, but there is another IndyCar race coming up this Sunday in Alabama. That Scott McLaughlin won there last year, and a couple of years ago before that, Joseph Newgarden has won there too, but also so has Pato O'Ward. So it is a good track for Penske. They should be fine. Of course, with the good thing, I suppose, is that this has happened now and not at Milwaukee or somewhere at the back end of the season when we've got a real hopefully a real championship fight on our hands, and then someone ends up losing a race for a technical query as such like this. So they have got themselves plenty of time. But as Jono said in the comment there, McLaughlin's now got 2 non-scores to his name for the first 2 races of the season. So that is a real stickler for the free team. But hopefully they can bounce back this weekend and pick it up at Barber. And as I think I mentioned in our chat during the afternoon, who does it fall into the hands of in the championship? Oh, hang on a minute. Yes, Scott Dixon again comes up smelling of roses with his win at the weekend, and now he's the points leader going to the Barber this weekend. But plenty of time for Penske there. Of course, they are, if not the powerhouse team in this championship. So plenty of time for them to get back. And of course, if it gets to a point later on in the year where one of them is clear in the championship of the others, then I'm sure, as we've often seen, they'll rally around their team leader and try and get them a helping hand towards winning the championship overall.
Yeah, you know, Matt, I was going to follow up on what you said about the series being in dire trouble. It's a good thing that the guy on that banner behind you is running the double this year and competing in the Indianapolis 500, because if he weren't doing that, I think, like we said before we came on the air, I think the 500 is going to be fine. The series itself is a whole nother matter here. I had forgotten, I'm sure NBC or USA, I guess, in this case, this weekend, ran some sort of promo or banner or sidebar somewhere telling you that there was a race this weekend, but I had forgotten that. I'd forgotten that 100 Days to Indy was coming back 2 days from now, until we saw a couple of people on social media talking about how they're going to handle how that affects that episode of the series. Just the marketing is absolutely non-existent, or if it does exist, it doesn't make it very far. So that is incredibly frustrating. To answer the question here in terms of these two Penske drivers, I think Scott McLaughlin's going to be a tall ask. I didn't realize that he had actually fallen all the way down to plumb last in the point standings there. That's going to be a tall order. Scott McLaughlin has a obviously tremendous skill set and a great team around him. And it is still very early, but you know, that's just even mentally, I think trying to climb up and start from the furthest possible position back is going to be a very tall order. Newgarden being kind of middle of the pack now, going from the points lead to, what is he now, 11th, I think. I think that's manageable. It could certainly come back to bite them, and losing all those points, you know, that could be the difference between winning or losing this championship. But it's not something that I think is completely impossible for him to overcome. It's just basically the equivalent of another bad race weekend or DNF on a weekend where otherwise he would have max points. So I don't think that it's an impossibility, but it certainly doesn't help. And, you know, again, it's like you said, Josh, it's a very interesting dynamic. It's like the reverse of the Obama giving Obama a medal meme here, because it's like, well, IndyCar is coming down too hard on Team Penske. They hate Team Penske, which some people were saying on Twitter today. And other people quoted it saying, you know, like the SpongeBob, how do we tell him sort of meme, but like, oh, by the way, it's actually Roger who owns the Speedway and owns the series. So, yeah, it just the optics are incredibly strange and bizarre at best, and they're absolutely terrible at worst. I mean, I don't know. I know people can be very talented in PR departments and trying to spin this as some sort of positive or some sort of at least non-negative. I don't know how you get out of this one. This does not look good.
Are we going to get a press release tomorrow or even Friday? Double points back for the Indy 500 brackets, just in case we need them.
Hey, the way this is going this week, who knows? I wouldn't be surprised.
INDYCAR will introduce the charter system as well, because we absolutely have to make sure we start in the field. And judging by our run, we can't guarantee it.
Will that be the next thing? We have, like we almost lost Will Power a couple of years ago. We have one of the Penskes not qualify. That'll be the next bullet in the foot.
I can see it coming. Mark my words here. I don't think I can honestly see one of them not qualifying, and my money would be on McLaughlin. I think I've got already. I was watching the test. Yes, he was quick, but I just didn't have a feeling about McLaughlin. He looked very skittish in that car to begin with. And remember, the oval layout of those cars is sort of locked in now, because they've got Aero Screen version 1 and they've got the Aero kit set up. So that's now sort of locked in. So they've already had a little bit of testing with that on the open day. Now we've got the second version that they're going to have to deal with the road and street courses. So basically what we've got right now is two different cars already competing in the series, which, because they are very different, because you can have the oval car, which is heavier than the road course car, because the version 1 Aero Screen Halo is what we said 6 or 7 pounds heavier,
Something like that. Wasn't
something
it?
like that, yeah. And so the road courses are lighter, and it's affecting them. You heard the driver say this weekend, it's different to drive because you throw the car in, and because of the weight's not the same at the front, it feels different. So you're going to have them adapting to that backwards and forwards. So effectively, and then if we do end up with the hybrid engines coming in, we've got effectively 3 different cars in one season. It's mad. This entire season of IndyCar feels like someone's just gone, pop the water balloons, and let's see what happens.
But Josh, to that point, this hybrid technology that was supposed to debut at the start of a year, that I guess was really the reason why Penske found themselves in this situation to begin with. What's the latest update on that? Like, I'm not. It's not a rhetorical question. I'm genuinely asking. Does anybody know? Like, is that still on for the Indy 500? Did they push it back again? I don't know what's going on.
It's supposed to be on
Detroit. It was Detroit. Yeah, which is the week after, isn't it?
Which is the worst place to debut it. At Detroit, a track where you can't overtake at, you can't cool. We had problems with engine cooling last year and brake cooling as well, and we're introducing a brand new system there. I literally, I'm starting to think to myself that you know that meme of the guy coming in with the pizza. Well, forget the little bit of a fire. He's walked into a burning building. The entire thing is on fire, and it just
this is fine,
worse.
dog.
Yeah. It's getting to that. It's Leslie Nielsen with that. This is fine. Everything's exploding behind like crazy. It's getting to the point where I generally don't know where it's going to go. So I'm going to ask an additional question here. Will we get to the halfway point of the season without major changes in personnel at the top tier of IndyCar? That's what I'm thinking here, because I think there's no one who's got control over it. You've got the TV rights deal that you've talked about in the roundtable. You've got Roger Penske sort of being battled for control by the other teams. You've got sort of mutinies going on. So do you think we'll see a big change in IndyCar personnel?
Ben, I'll let you take this.
Yeah, go on.
We better. I mean, we better. I mean, I that's the obvious answer. I don't know that mid-season, I don't know that would be feasible. I think that would throw everything into even more chaos than we're even in now. But I will say this though, between the news that we got today and the news that we got yesterday with the ratings coming in, Roger doesn't need to sell tomorrow. He needs to sell tonight. He needed to sell yesterday. It just, for whatever reason, clearly is not working out. And you don't have the excuse of the pandemic anymore. You know, you don't have. You just don't have the excuse that, just give him a couple more years, he can get settled back in, and clock's ticking. I don't know what else to say.